Thank you for downloading our Move the Chains podcast presented by Doman Building Materials and RBC. Up ahead is part 2 of our series surrounding the Stop Overdose campaign and stigma surrounding mental health and drug addiction. We'll be talking about a couple of issues on this podcast that may be sensitive to some listeners and viewers. Discretion is advised, and thanks again for downloading this podcast where we talk about a couple of very important issues that the BC Lions are proud to help be a part of.
I didn't know I could just say, hey, look, this is too much. I need somebody to take this off my hands, or I need support with this. I kept saying, no, I got it. I'm the problem-solving guy. I'm the guy that deals with this. And I grenaded my whole life.
We move the chains. You hear what I'm saying? Real players can relate, cause they the ones that was playing. Be great, just wait. We be really in the field. Now we really on the mic, speaking truly how we feel. For real, screaming hut 1, hut 2.
And we are back on Move the Chains, a presentation of Doman Building Materials and RBC. I'm your fill-in host, Matt Baker, as Ryan Phillips and the staff anxiously preparing for training camp, as we're about inside of 30 days from being up in Kamloops. Time flies, but we're not here to talk about football per se today specifically. Part 2 of our podcast surrounding the Stop Overdose campaign, and a very important subject. It's a very important one, as we talked about 2021 as far as being probably the deadliest year on record as far as drug overdose related deaths. And earlier, part 1, we featured the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, and we touched on how stigma contributes to this overdose crisis. And this episode will take a closer look at that stigma and the impact it has on people who use these substances, as well as their families. Can't forget the overall impact. And we have 3 special guests joining us today. One you might not be familiar with, Trevor Botkin joining us from an organization known as HeroWork Victoria. Trevor, I believe, the executive director. We'll hear from him in just a second. Trevor's career in construction has spanned more than 25 years, and he has firsthand experience dealing with the stigma around addiction by people in the trades, obviously, and we're going to get more into that. And also, these other 2 gentlemen probably don't need much of an introduction, but they've made great contributions beyond just the football field. We have Shawn Millington, former Lions running back, the pride of North Vancouver, and was watching some old YouTube CFL footage. A great panel member on CBC back in the day as well was Shawn, great broadcaster. JR LaRose, you know JR with through this program, Stop Overdose, as well as our Be More Than a Bystander program. Great community ambassador is JR. They're involved with the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions Stop the Stigma campaign as ambassadors. And we'll hear from the 2 players and what they've been doing for this campaign in just a moment. But Trevor, introduce yourself and just give a little bit of background on your life, career, and what brought you to where you are today and why you're involved with such an important cause.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. Good to see you, JR and Shawn. Like you said, I spent over 25 years in the construction industry to date. About 23 of those years were actually in the trades as a carpenter and a superintendent. Now I have the privilege of leading a local Victoria community organization charity called HeroWork, and we renovate partner charities infrastructure spaces so they can help more people better and farther into the future. My story with addiction spans most of my life, to be honest. But with substances being the driving force in my addiction in the last 12 years. I've faced the stigma. I've had to moderate myself or manage my life in the secrets because of stigma, and I've lost people who are close to me in the trades because they couldn't step out from the shadows themselves for fear of repercussions in their life.
And we'll get into that in just a little bit here as far as what makes tradespeople more vulnerable to these substances. But Shawn, Shawn, I suppose we'll start with you. Both of you have been involved. We've seen video PSAs that we've produced here Each of you maybe just talk about your involvement and why you chose to align yourselves with such an important topic.
Well, for me, it's clearly something that is a massive issue in our city. I know lots of people who have struggled with these sorts of issues. And for me, I think if we can do anything to help reduce the amount of stigma, like we just heard, like that's been a significant component in making it more difficult for people. So if we can reduce the stigma of the concepts around the use of drugs and the things that people are going through, then they're more likely to ask for help. They're more likely to accept help, etc. And I think that only helps us solve the problem on a large scale, and as well solve it at an individual scale as well.
JR?
Yeah, well, good afternoon. I think, why I'm so passionate about it and I'm so happy to be part of this is we look at the amount of people that have been impacted and personally speaking, family members that have struggled with addictions and close friends of mine as well. And there is such a stigma around it, almost being seen as weak if you seek help. And it's about bringing awareness to this so we can alleviate, those barriers and stigmas. At the end of the day, we need to treat people as human beings. It comes from a place of compassion, showing that we care, and so that's why I'm so happy to be a part of this program in particular.
We talked in part one of this on how men are overrepresented in the poison drug crisis. Trevor, is there anything you can add to that from where you sit?
Yeah, in my experience, I came into the trades, at a very young age, at 19 years old. I grew up on a farm. I came from some pretty strong ideas of what being a man looked like, how to carry yourself in the world. When I walked onto a job site, I felt very, very comfortable there in that setting, and not unique in my pattern of thinking. I think if you walk into any culture that's mainly male dominated, you're going to find similar beliefs in what it means to be a man, and being weak is not one of those things, or being perceived as weak, or not being able to deal with your life or your problems or anything, in a strong way, right? So what I've seen in the trades is that there is this place where people get trapped in that they get in too deep, they get in over their head, whether it's in physical injury, mental health, or addiction, and they don't know how to ask for help. They don't know how to get the support they need. They just sit there, and it gets worse and worse, and for every day it just gets compounded. It's the stigma, because as addicts, we've all heard the saying, denial is the first sign that you're an alcoholic. Well, it's the first sign, certainly not the last. And for many of us who struggle in addiction, we're very aware of our situation. We're very aware of our reality. And we spend a lot of time wearing other people's ideas of what addiction is or who we are. We don't believe in ourselves. We don't have hope. We don't think we're good people. And society is telling us that just confirming that to us. So it makes it very hard for us to stand up or to even believe we deserve help.
It's interesting. There were some parallels with being an athlete, pressure to perform, and we'll get the other two's thoughts on those parallels here in just a minute. But, construction is obviously, we hear about how booming it is in this province. There's new projects being done across the street from us here. The new Legion, the new housing that's going up, great for everything. But, there's pressure to perform in these jobs as well. I mean, how much does that pressure contribute to a lot of men and women in the trades struggling with substances, Trevor?
Yeah, it's a performance-based issue. It's or industry. It's not, we're to be fair to employers, that we're bidding very tightly on projects. Our we've got to for companies to be profitable, we have to get an extremely large amount of work done every day. Critical milestones need to be hit. It's easy to lose track of people's mental health. It's just not something we've talked about in the last 5-10 years. When we talk about employee safety, right? We don't talk about the health of the workforce as it connects with mental health and our addiction. And addiction very much has been seen as this place where, it's if you're caught high or drunk on a work site, you're fired. I mean, that's what people are trying to avoid, is those repercussions. And if, it's a small world, if that word gets out there, you worry that you might not be employable in the future, or that image or that connection will stay with you for a long time. But I think a lot like sports, I routinely bring a number of young men and women into the site trailer every morning. We hand out our tasks for the day, and everybody goes back out there in some brutal weather sometimes, and hard, really tough work to carry through the day's task list and get it done.
JR, what can you add in terms of men being vulnerable when they're in pressure job situations?
I think it's tough, right? Especially you look at it from an athlete perspective. We're seen as these almost modern day gladiators, where we're taught not to show emotion. You can't cry, you can't be weak. It's you got to push through the pain, and it's one of those things where there's a lot more awareness now being brought to the forefront. On especially, and you look at mental health, on people are really being impacted by this. And this is something that I'd seen firsthand. I played 9 years of pro football, 4 in Edmonton, 5 in BC. And you see the amount of players that have been impacted. Even you talk about substance abuse, this is almost essentially treated like a piece of meat, in a lot of instances. And Trevor, you hit the nail on the head. You said what you do in your industry, it's performance-based. Same with us. If we don't play, we don't get paid. And so that just the mental strain that has on people, and people not wanting to talk about, the things that they're going through. It's from an athletic standpoint, it can become very dark. And again, we're not seeing, there hasn't really been a place where we can be open. And I think now things are starting to change with the different campaigns that have come on mental health, and addictions as well. It gives people a place to be able to start to open up. But for sure, just from the years in my experience, you've seen that these places are extremely tough to be vulnerable. You're seen as weak if you show vulnerability.
Shawn, you were a very competitive athlete as well from a young age, and succeeded at pretty much every level. But again, your take on sort of that attitude out there of you have to be tough, you have to suck it up and play through pain and injuries. Not everyone sought help who needed help, right?
Well, I think it's a very slippery slope to get onto. You might not even initially be thinking that this is the direction you're moving in, but you start using something that's giving you some assistance. Maybe you've gotten onto some painkillers. I mean, I know even recently I had to go on hydromorphone for an issue that I was having. And I'm a high tolerance sort of a guy, and had to have a higher dosage than the average person in order to deal with it. And when Cam came to come off, I was like, why do I feel so weird? And then it dawned on me, like, I'm going through withdrawal. Like, that's what's happening to my body right now. So it can easily put you into a situation, or you can easily find yourself in a situation that you didn't anticipate. And especially if the scenario that got you into it in the first place is ongoing. Now, how do you manage the flip side of the thing that's going on for you? So in the culture of football or construction or any of these sorts of things, where, like as Trevor said, they are primarily male dominated, you get this ethos where everybody feels like, oh, I can't talk about my problems, I can't show that I'm vulnerable, I can't show that I'm really hurting, I've got to suck it up and pull through. And that's a powder keg that is waiting to explode and cause problems for everybody. And that's why we're having this conversation, to hopefully head that off before we get to that stage.
Trevor, are we seeing a shift in the right direction here? I think we're starting to, but what sort of tools and resources have been put into place specifically for the younger generation when it comes to combating this problem?
Yeah, I do have hope. I have a lot of hope. We're sitting here having this conversation, and I probably wasn't aware of it, but thinking back, I don't think I can remember hearing anything like this on a podcast or radio or in print anywhere in the rest of my career. So the fact that we're having these conversations is key. I'm seeing young people come into the industry with a different sensibility about them, a different idea of what their career is going to look like, what they're not going to tolerate. That's creating some havoc too, because you got the old guard that doesn't recognize the industry anymore. They don't feel, a place where they fit in for so long. They maybe don't feel like they belong anymore. And so, it doesn't mean things don't need to change though. So I've had the privilege of being a part of a local project that started here in Victoria called the Tailgate Toolkit, which has now received a bunch of funding from the BC Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions to roll out across British Columbia. That'll bring some awareness to trades, and also for sort of to encourage the conversation, reduce the stigma, and encourage help seeking. And at the same time, talking and training supervisors what to look for, what to be aware of. And again, having that conversation, so it's just not looked at as a punitive thing or something we need to punish people for, but treat people like humans. Because I'll tell you, I have the honor of working in community now for that's my life, and I am surrounded by people who are out there in community doing great things, who come from backgrounds that are far darker than mine, and so it just tells me, like, I don't care if somebody beats their addiction and gets a job at Burger King or finds a way to make a difference for many. There are beautiful people suffering there that need our guidance and need our help. And we certainly shouldn't be shaming them for the real serious medical distress that they're in their lives.
It's a good transition into the next question here. JR, are you seeing a shift in society in general? Are men, young men, whatever level they're playing at, do you think they're more willing to talk and seek help for whatever issues that may be arising?
100%. And again, it's removing those stigmas around it. The more people, I think Bell has that Let's Talk and the other different things of the other different programs that are out there have now given people a platform where, one, they feel that they're able to be safe and be vulnerable. And I think as men, that's the hardest thing, is to be vulnerable when it's been ingrained in us that we can't show any type of weakness or emotion. And so it's things like this that keep, keep making progression and progress. And that's truly what this is all about. I was just actually speaking at a conference today on mental health and addictions. And we see the need for more, especially men, to feel safe, where they can actually open up and not be judged. I think oftentimes people just want to be heard rather than talked at. And it's programs like this that will give more insight and help people speak freely on what they're being, affected by.
Brings us to sort of the next point here. People always seem to support others when they see they're dealing with physical problems, right? I mean, sports, contact sport like football, that kind of goes without saying. But when it comes to some of these problematic substance abuse or addiction, people oftentimes, I think, don't know what to say or do. Sometimes it just seems to disappear. Why do you think that is, and what can be done about it? Trevor, start with you.
I think that, listen, number one, listen without judgment. Don't always try and find a solution. I'd rather somebody keep talking to me than not. And sometimes, a lot of times, I feel, and I've seen that just having somewhere to share what you're feeling can save a life. I mean, it doesn't, you don't have to provide the solution. Just be that person they can come to. It'll make a bigger difference than you think. And the other thing is, we treat these people with addiction differently, and it's harder to help because we're hard to love. I mean, let's be honest, the challenges that come with people in addiction can be very hard for people. So, boundary setting, but but that old tough love idea is just not saving any lives. It's not helping anybody.
How do you open that door kind of without being accusatory, Trevor?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Depending on where a person's at in their addiction, they're ready to have the door open or not, and they could keep slamming it shut. But I just check in with people. Are you okay? Things look challenging for you. Probing questions that aren't direct and to the point, right? I mean, I this whole week you've seemed off. I just want you to know if there's anything going on, you can come to me in confidence and we can work it out. And I'll do what I can, but I can guarantee I'll just listen and I won't judge, and it'll stay with me. I mean, confidentiality is huge for people who are suffering, because we're worried about the world knowing our dirty secret. We're worried about all that stigma, all those negative things said about us being true.
What I like there, sort of interrupt you, Matt, is, Trevor, you led with empathy and compassion. And that's there's no judgment there. And I think that's big, is you're showing that you care. Yeah. How are you doing? Something seems off. Can we talk? Is I think instrumental in moving forward and helping people feel comfortable and being able to talk.
Shawn, any advice from your chair on how people can seek help?
Well, for me, where I come from is to try to remember that what I'm seeing on the surface is symptomatic. At least that's my perspective. It's not the real problem. So, okay, yes, I may be identifying or think I've identified that this person is struggling with whatever substance they happen to be struggling with, but that's not the problem, right? Like, so, what Trevor is saying makes a lot of sense. Like, hey, like, what's going on? I've seen you, having some issues, maybe. Like, it feels like there might be something off. Like, is there something I can help you with or whatever? Like, coming at it, as JR is saying, from an empathetic and caring perspective, where somebody knows and feels that you're not being judgmental about how they're choosing to deal with their issue, but you're just trying to be there to help. Because I think that's the big thing. Like, if we can get down to why is this happening in the first place? Like, what led me to go down this path? Why did I choose? What is happening that is making me look for a solution? And this happens to be the solution, and it's not working so great, maybe, but there's still a greater problem that got me here in the first place. And if we can start to have conversations about that, then I think that's where we start to help people, and that's where lives get changed.
Yeah, Shawn, I think you hit on something there with that. You're really the addiction, the substances are the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more going on. I know for me, the substances were a medicine, and they probably kept me alive longer than I might have been without them, until they turned on me too, right? So there's very real things going on in your life and real feelings that you're dealing with, that these substances are helping you to manage and cope with. They're not healthy. It's not the right answer. It's not a good long-term play, but it's very hard to get out of it. It's very difficult. It's a lot of hard work goes into changing the direction of that.
More on the help issue. I mean, the truth hurts, right? Words can hurt. Trevor, how do the negative words we use perpetuate this stigma, so to speak?
Yeah, they still sting. Because I care about, I'm 3 years into recovery here, just over 3 years, and I just, every time I hear one, I know it hurts somebody. Like, it can feel it in my core, because I was there and I remember hearing those words. And I'll tell you, bear with me here, as an addict, you know where you're at, how you feel, your sense of self-worth is nothing. And then you're not denying that you're an addict. You just don't want everybody to know your truth. And when you hear that outside person say that we're junkie or talk down about this, any number of the ways we judge people who suffer, you're included in that. And it just keeps you down. I mean, it kept me from asking. It took me to the point where I was ready to take my life. I mean, let's be real here. This is life and death stuff. Very real people are suffering, losing their homes and their family. this is not something that we should be teasing people about or making fun of in society.
What was it, Trevor? Is your story? I don't know how comfortable you are sharing it in this forum, but was it related to a lot of the stuff we're talking about here? Pressures of the job, pressures at home life. What can you share?
I had a number of things coming up for me, that played into it. I think there's a place for some people being genetically predisposed to addiction. I feel that in my core, but I also was not, I came up sort of being other than and not treated well by my cohorts, other members of my cohorts in elementary school and junior high and high school. And I couldn't wait to be done school. I got into the trades, found this comfort zone. Well, there's a lot of people in the trades that weren't, destined to be doctors or lawyers and stuff like that. Right. So I found a place where I fit in, but living in that cycle of work hard, play hard, inevitably just became too much. This culture of taking on too much as a superintendent. I notoriously would take on the hardest jobs with the most troubling, hardest, difficult clients. I was known as that guy. I could, everywhere, 12 years ago, when I, looking back with the clarity I have now, I was having a mental health breakdown. Everywhere I turned in my life, it was problems. And I didn't know I could just say, hey, look, this is too much. I need somebody to take this off my hands, or I need support with this. I kept saying, no, I got it. I'm the problem solving guy. I'm the guy that deals with this. And I grenaded my whole life and really started self-medicated with substances. I could sit here and tell you it was an injury, but that really wasn't my story. I've got lots of injuries in my past, but my story is not uncommon. Something that I had played around with my life and used to blow off some steam now really got its hooks in me and started to help me medicate with a very distressing mental health crises. And then until inevitably on March 6th, 2019, my addiction had led me to my mom's basement for the last 18 months of my life. Doing everything I could to get out of the house every day and doing everything I could to get back in that basement every night, to the point where I was just waiting for her to go to work so I could make the ultimate decision. I just didn't think there was life for me after this. I didn't know there was a way through this, and something shifted and I said, you know what? I think it was honestly that's that hard worker. And you just said, look, you haven't really tried yet. You haven't, I've tried to do everything on my own. The last thing I haven't done is ask for help. And so I asked for help and I got it. And here we are 3 years later. I have the opportunity to share with others and do my part, living amends for maybe some of the bridges I burnt in the past, but I'm able to sit and share my experience in the hopes that somebody else might hear something they need to hear, something they're ready to hear, or share it with a friend.
Wow. Appreciate you sharing. Asking for help, definitely not easy. JR, Shawn, any experiences, family, friends that we're kind of talking about here that you can share at all?
I haven't been up close with it, to be perfectly frank. That's not entirely true. A really good friend of mine struggled with substances and in the end did make the ultimate decision, as Trevor alluded to there. And that was pretty difficult. I think she did try to get help, but she at the same point wasn't really ready. I don't know at a deep level what was truly going on inside of her and all the struggles that she was dealing with, but it did inform my opinion a fair bit about how difficult it is to have a bunch of issues and then trying to maintain, quote unquote, the public face that you feel you need to keep up because you can't talk about these things openly with anybody else. And the importance of pulling that wall down so that while I may not understand exactly what's going on, and maybe you don't feel comfortable to share exactly what's going on, hopefully if you're able to talk about it enough with enough different people or in different circumstances, something will get done. Some peg will drop, some penny will flip for you, and you'll go, oh, this is how I move forward. Or somebody will say something that triggers something in you to really change the direction that you're moving. Because I think, as Trevor just said, it wasn't even really sure what the moment was exactly, but having a moment where he reached out in genuineness, looking for assistance, and it was there for him, made the big difference, right? And I think if we can be there, like we said on this call, waiting and being ready when the call to action comes, hopefully then we can help somebody.
JR, anything to add there?
Yeah, this is something that that hit home for me, on a personal level of, I had a lot of family members that have struggled with this. And, there's that old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And I think we all agree that's the farthest thing from the truth. And, when my sister was struggling with her addictions and I was young, I had a hard time, accepting that. I was using words that hurt. And, my sister made it very clear to me, that I almost made her feel less than, that she wasn't important. And I didn't have that realization. I was dealing with the anger, the emotion from myself, rather than meeting my sister where she was at. We're so easy as a society to judge a book by its cover, but let's find out what the root issue is, what that person is going through. So instead of using, words that hurt, and can have people feel less than, or powerless, let's use words that help and can support one another. And that was the biggest thing that I took from when my sister was going through her addiction, was just being that support system. Instead of trying to come up with a solution, for me, it was just shutting up and just listening, hearing my sister out, and and being that support when she was ready. So yeah, that's something that it really hit home for me.
I think that's important too, because talking somebody out of using drugs, is a very tough outcome to pursue, right? So I think for me, it's when I connect with people that are struggling right now, it's just being a voice, somebody they can listen, that'll listen to them, and not necessarily talk them out of their path, but just talk them into making better decisions and seeking some way to manage things in a way that doesn't lead to their demise, right? And like you said, Shawn just pointed out, like, people got to be ready, and I believe in that. But I also believe that ready can be a split second. It can be a moment in time. For me, if I asked for help and maybe that didn't happen, and I was able to get more into my withdrawal, maybe my amnesia would have set in again, or maybe I would have made that decision to end my life. And you never know what it looks like, but ready for an addict can be fleeting until the pattern takes over again.
And we can do a whole other series on these issues, because it's important to talk about, right? And I thank Trevor, I thank you and you guys as well, Shawn and JR, for sharing your knowledge and what you're trying to do to help stop this stigma. It's a very toxic and complex problem, obviously. But to wrap it up, love to hear any final reflections you all have on how the BC Lions can help be part of this change. Trevor, start with you.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are doing a great job right now, using your platform, using your voice. I've had the pleasure of participating in the More Than a Bystander program with JR, and so I've seen how you guys are using your voice to sort of bring awareness to a number of different issues, and your celebrity and your name and community. And I appreciate the heck out of that. Men need to see other men talking about this stuff. It's the only way it's going to normalize the conversation, and not just men, but men that have something they want or have something they admire. And I think to that end, BC Lions are doing just a wonderful job with this. Final comment: if you're watching this and you're struggling, it can be better. Believe me, there's a path through this to a place where you can find some peace in your life and be there for the people around you in a better way.
JR, Shawn?
Yeah, I think I'm so proud to be an alumni of the BC Lions, from the program, be more than a bystander to something, this that we're talking about, removing the stigma, around addiction and mental health. And the fact that we have men speaking about these issues to other men makes an impact. We can't underestimate that. We're seen as these modern day gladiators, top of our respected food chain in our sport. So to be able for other men to be vulnerable and speak up about things, I think that's where true change starts to happen, is by having these conversations.
And I would have to say that I as well think it's fantastic that the BC Lions have chosen to get involved in this particular area. I know it's a very challenging subject and it's fraught with all sorts of preconceptions, and people have different ideas about how this should be dealt with. But the only way we can get to a place of helping, which is what I think everybody at the end of the day wants to do, is for us to be able to have open conversations, to have frank, difficult discussions about things that are not easy, and to do that with compassion and empathy. And I think that's what we've tried to do on this particular call. And as the Lions as an organization continues to try and do and represent that in the community. And I, for one, will always try and support that. And to echo Trevor's comment as well, that, hey, if anybody's listening to this and there's something that's going on, like, it can get better, it does get better, and there is help available that you can access. So keep plugging.
Outstanding work, gentlemen. And the conversation doesn't end here. For those listening, watching, to learn more about everything, we encourage you to visit stopoverdosebc.ca. Move the Chains, as always, a presentation of Doman Building Materials and RBC. And we thank you all for joining us. Until next time. And we thank you once again for listening to this very special edition of Move the Chains. Anyone seeking additional info on the Tailgate Toolkit website that Trevor was mentioning earlier, you can visit the tailgatetoolkit.ca. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health and experiencing thoughts of suicide, you can contact 1-800-SUICIDE to speak to a trained volunteer and receive information and support.
What up, RP? Let's turn it up one time. You did. We move the change. You hear what I'm saying? Real players can relate, cause they the ones that was playing. Be great. Just wait. We be really in the field. Now we really on the mic, speaking truly how we feel. For real, screaming hut one, hut two. Tell me what you gon' do. Coming off that edge, only way to stop is hold you. Never let the gatekeepers control you. Once you lose your voice, now they definitely know they own you, but not I. Rob Phillips coming so fly, pick 6 on the way when that ball's in the sky. They say time is money, and I wonder why. Now I know that's a goddamn lie. Let's go. Come and get game from the chains. Everybody love it when you the chains. Haters hate to see me really do my thing. Move the chains, move the chains. Let's go. The chains. The #1 podcast. Move the chains. Do my thing. We getting this dough. You know how it go. Grab a seat and tune in. Then tell me what you know. Back when TIP said get it on the flow. RP was on BC putting on a show. For show screaming touchdown, touchdown. Everything you want now. Fans be the chain gang. Game every month now. Don't even try the front now. These new dudes be something like my son now. Come on now. I'm better than ever. The game that we speak gotta be clever. Ball hard no matter the weather. I cheese for the picks while I'm counting this cheddar. On my mama, boy, I never will let her. But so you know I gotta get up and run just to come and get game from the chains. Everybody love it when you the chains. Haters hate to see me really do my thing. Move the chains, move the chains. Let's go. Move the chains. The #1 podcast. Move the chains, do my thing. Come and get game from the chains. Everybody love it when you the chains. Haters hate to see me really do my thing. Move the chains, move the chains. Let's go. Move the chains. The #1 podcast. Move the chains, do my thing.